What would you do if a homeless-looking stranger walked into your workplace, demanding service with torn clothes and dirt under his fingernails? Most people would judge immediately, perhaps even turn him away. But what if that stranger was actually your boss, testing your character in disguise? This is exactly what happened when billionaire Marcus Wellington decided to visit his own pharmacy chain incognito. The clerk working that day had no idea her response would change both their lives forever. This story isn't just about wealth or poverty. It's about human dignity, respect, and the power of treating everyone equally. By the end of this video, you'll question every assumption you've ever made about people based on their appearance. Let's dive into one of the most shocking undercover operations in retail history. Grab your coffee, because this story will keep you on the edge of your seat. Marcus Wellington wasn't born into wealth, far from it. Growing up in a cramped apartment with his single mother, he knew what it meant to be invisible to society. He watched his mom work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table, often being treated like she didn't matter because of her worn-out clothes and tired face. Those childhood memories shaped him into the man he became, a self-made billionaire who built a pharmaceutical empire from absolutely nothing. But success brought a troubling realization. The higher he climbed, the more disconnected he became from the struggles of ordinary people. His executive team praised him constantly, shielding him from the harsh realities of how his employees and customers were actually treated. Marcus began to wonder, were his stores living up to the values of dignity and respect he held so dear? That question kept him awake at night, gnawing at his conscience. The idea struck him during a routine board meeting when his PR director boasted about their excellent customer service ratings. Marcus had heard the corporate speak before, sanitized reports, cherry-picked data, and glowing testimonials that felt too perfect to be true. He decided right then that he needed to see the truth for himself, without the buffer of his status and wealth. Within a week, Marcus had transformed himself completely. He stopped shaving, dirtied his clothes with authentic street grime, and practiced the slouched posture of someone defeated by life. His transformation was so convincing that even his personal assistant walked past him twice without recognition during a test run. Marcus chose a pharmacy location in a working-class neighborhood, one he'd never visited before. The plan was simple. Walk in looking homeless, attempt to purchase medication, and observe how he'd be treated. He had no script, no expectations, just a burning need to know if his company honored human dignity when nobody important was watching. The morning of his undercover mission arrived with unexpected nervousness. Marcus stood outside the pharmacy for several minutes, watching through the glass windows as customers came and went. He noticed families with children, elderly people moving slowly with canes, and young professionals rushing in during their lunch breaks. Everyone seemed to receive polite, efficient service, but none of them looked like him in his current disguise. Taking a deep breath, Marcus pushed through the door, immediately feeling the air conditioning hit his face. The store was clean and well organized, with bright fluorescent lights illuminating rows of products. Behind the counter stood a young woman named Sarah Chen, a pharmacy clerk in her late 20s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She was helping an elderly customer find the right blood pressure medication, speaking slowly and clearly so the woman could understand. Marcus watched this interaction carefully, noting Sarah's patience and genuine care. When Sarah finished with the elderly customer, Marcus shuffled toward the counter, fully embracing his homeless persona. He could feel other customers' eyes on him, their bodies subtly shifting away as he approached. The judgment was palpable. He was suddenly the uncomfortable presence everyone hoped would leave quickly. Sarah looked up from her computer screen, and for a split second, Marcus saw her expression change as she registered his appearance. Here was the moment of truth. Would she treat him with dignity or dismiss him like so many others had dismissed people like his mother decades ago? What happened next would determine everything. Sarah's face didn't show disgust or fear. Instead, she smiled warmly and said, "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" Her tone held no condescension, no impatience, just genuine willingness to assist. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat, reminded of his mother's stories about the rare kind souls who treated her like a person. Marcus cleared his throat, intentionally speaking in a rough, uncertain voice. I need to get some medication," he stammered, pulling a crumpled prescription from his pocket, one he'd obtained legitimately from his doctor for this very test. The prescription was for a common antibiotic, nothing expensive or suspicious. He handed it to Sarah with shaking hands, watching her face carefully for any sign of judgment. Sarah took the paper gently, smoothing it out on the counter without any visible disgust at its wrinkled condition. "Of course, let me process this for you," she said, typing information into her computer system. Another customer behind Marcus sighed loudly, clearly irritated at having to wait behind someone who looked homeless. Sarah glanced up briefly, and Marcus saw her jaw tighten slightly, but not at him. She was bothered by the other customer's rudeness, not by Marcus's appearance. This small detail spoke volumes about her character. As Sarah worked on processing the prescription, she made small talk in a way that felt genuine rather than forced. "It's getting cold outside, isn't it?" she commented, looking at Marcus with actual concern in her eyes. "Do you have somewhere warm to stay tonight?" The question wasn't intrusive or pitying, it was human. Marcus felt his carefully constructed persona crack slightly as emotion threatened to overwhelm him. "I manage," he replied vaguely, staying in character. Sarah nodded, not pressing further, but clearly filing away the information. She disappeared into the back pharmacy area to fill the prescription, leaving Marcus standing at the counter. He noticed other staff members glancing at him, whispering to each other. A security guard had even positioned himself closer, clearly watching Marcus with suspicion. But when Sarah returned 5 minutes later with his medication, she acted as though nothing was amiss, treating him with the same professionalism she'd shown every other customer that morning. Then came the moment Marcus had specifically designed to test her character: the payment. He pulled out a handful of crumpled dollar bills and loose change from his pocket, counting it slowly on the counter with trembling fingers. The total came to exactly $23, but Marcus's money only added up to $19.67. He recounted it twice, his performance of distress completely genuine now, as emotions from his childhood poverty surfaced unexpectedly. I'm short," he said quietly, his voice breaking slightly. "I thought I had enough. I'm sorry, maybe I can come back tomorrow." The pharmacy policy was clear: no payment, no medication. Most clerks would simply apologize and send him away. It wasn't personal, just business. But Sarah looked at the money on the counter, then at Marcus's face, then back at the prescription label. She bit her lip, clearly thinking hard about something. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. What Sarah did next shocked everyone within earshot. She reached into her own purse under the counter and pulled out a $5 bill. "Don't worry about it," she said softly, adding her money to his pile and processing the transaction. "We all have tough days. You need this medication." Marcus stood frozen, unable to speak. This woman, who probably didn't earn much more than minimum wage, had just spent her own money, without hesitation, to help a complete stranger she believed was homeless. The other customers who had been watching with judgment now looked away uncomfortably, perhaps ashamed of their own assumptions. Marcus's eyes stung with tears he had to fight back. This wasn't just good customer service. This was extraordinary human kindness, the kind that couldn't be taught in any corporate training program. Sarah handed him the medication bag along with the receipt, smiling gently. "Take care of yourself, okay?" she said, her concern absolutely genuine. Marcus managed to mumble a thank you before turning to leave, his mind reeling from what had just happened. As he walked toward the exit, he heard Sarah's supervisor approach her, having witnessed the transaction. "Sarah, you know you can't pay for customers' medications from your own pocket," the supervisor said in a hushed but stern tone. "It's against company policy. This comes out of your paycheck as a violation." Marcus froze near the door, his hand on the handle. Sarah's voice came back, quiet but firm. "I understand. Write me up if you need to, but he needed that medication, and I'd make the same choice again." The conviction in her voice was absolute. She wasn't seeking praise or recognition. She simply believed it was the right thing to do. Marcus felt something shift fundamentally inside him. In that moment, he realized he'd found something incredibly rare. An employee who embodied the values he'd built his company on, even when she thought no one important was watching. He had to make this right. Marcus walked out of the pharmacy, but didn't go far. He circled around to the parking lot and sat in his car, still dressed in his disguise. His hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone and immediately called his chief human resources officer. "I need you to pull the complete employee file for Sarah Chen at our Riverside location," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to know everything. Her employment history, performance reviews, any disciplinary actions, salary information, all of it." Within 15 minutes, his phone buzzed with an encrypted email containing Sarah's complete record. What Marcus read made his heart sink with both sadness and anger. Sarah had been working for his company for 4 years, consistently receiving excellent performance reviews from customers, but mediocre ratings from management. Her salary was barely above entry level despite her experience, and she had been passed over for 3 promotions in the past 2 years. The reasons cited in her file made Marcus's blood boil. Lacks professional judgment in business decisions. Indeed, digging deeper into the notes, Marcus discovered that Sarah had been written up twice before for similar violations. Once for spending 15 minutes helping an elderly customer understand his medication schedule when there was a line, and once for calling an ambulance for a customer having a medical emergency before getting manager approval. Both incidents were marked as time theft and exceeding job responsibilities without authorization. Marcus felt sick reading these reports. Here was an employee who genuinely cared about people, who embodied everything he thought his company stood for, and she was being punished for it. Meanwhile, he'd been sitting in corporate meetings celebrating customer satisfaction scores that were apparently meaningless. The disconnect between his vision and reality was staggering. He realized that somewhere along the way, his company had lost its soul, prioritizing efficiency and profit over the human values that should have been at its core. Sarah's actions today weren't an anomaly. They were consistent with who she was, and she'd been penalized for it repeatedly. Marcus made another call, this time to his personal lawyer. "I need you to draft some documents immediately," he said, his mind already racing ahead to what needed to happen next. "I want full legal protection for what I'm about to do." He spent the next hour in his car, making calls and setting plans in motion. But he knew that simply rewarding Sarah wasn't enough. This was a symptom of a larger disease in his organization. He needed to understand how widespread the problem was and who was responsible for creating a culture that punished compassion. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Marcus finally removed some of his disguise, cleaning his face and changing into clean clothes he kept in his car. But he maintained enough of the homeless appearance to still be unrecognizable. He walked back into the pharmacy, this time heading straight to the administrative office in the back. The store manager, a middle-aged man named Derek Thompson, looked up from his desk with immediate suspicion. "Can I help you?" Derek asked coldly, his hand moving subtly toward the phone, clearly ready to call security. Marcus decided to drop part of his act. "My name is Marcus Wellington," he said clearly, watching Derek's face drain of all color. "I own this company, and I was in your store this morning dressed as a homeless person. I witnessed something that demands immediate attention." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no sound emerging. Marcus continued, his voice sharp with controlled anger. "I watched one of your employees, Sarah Chen, show extraordinary compassion to someone she believed was a homeless customer. She paid for my medication out of her own pocket when I was short on cash. And then I watched you reprimand her for it and threaten to dock her pay." Derek finally found his voice, stammering, "Sir, I was just following company policy. We can't have employees making unauthorized transactions." It sets a bad precedent. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes cold. Tell me, Derek, what policy states that human kindness should be punished? Derek fumbled with papers on his desk, pulling out an employee handbook. Section 12, subsection 4. Employees are not authorized to provide discounts, free merchandise, or financial assistance to customers without manager approval. Violation results in disciplinary action up to and including termination. He read the policy with growing confidence, believing he was justified. Marcus took the handbook and read the policy himself, feeling disgust rise in his throat. And tell me, Derek, when did you become a manager here? Derek straightened proudly. 3 years ago, sir. I've improved efficiency by 18% and reduced customer transaction time by 12%. My metrics are among the best in the region. Those words, efficiency, metrics, transaction time, suddenly sounded hollow and soulless to Marcus. I see, Marcus said slowly. And in those 3 years, how many complaints have you received about employee compassion or helpfulness? Derek looked confused. Complaints about being too helpful? Sir, that's not really a metric we track. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding everything now. Exactly. You've optimized for everything except what actually matters. Marcus asked Derek to call Sarah into the office, saying only that there was an issue that needed to be addressed. Derek complied, looking nervous, but still believing he was in the right. When Sarah entered the small office, her face showed immediate concern and resignation. She clearly thought she was about to be fired. Please sit down, Sarah, Marcus said gently, watching her eyes widen as she recognized something familiar about this cleaned-up stranger, but couldn't quite place him. I'm Marcus Wellington, the owner of this pharmacy chain. I was the homeless man you helped this morning. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears instantly. Oh my God, she whispered. I just wanted to help. Marcus smiled warmly. I know. That's exactly why I'm here. Sarah, you did something today that I've been searching for throughout my entire company. You treated a human being with dignity, regardless of their appearance or ability to pay. You did the right thing, even knowing it would cost you. Sarah's tears spilled over as she shook her head. I'm so sorry if I embarrassed the company. I know I broke the rules, but he needed that medication and I just couldn't. Marcus held up his hand, stopping her. Sarah, you have nothing to apologize for. In fact, I'm the one who needs to apologize to you. He turned to Derek, his expression hardening. You're fired, effective immediately. Pack your personal belongings and leave the premises within the hour. HR will contact you about your final paycheck and exit paperwork. Derek's face went from pale to bright red. What? You can't fire me. I was enforcing company policy. I've done everything by the book. Marcus's voice was ice cold. You enforced the letter of a policy while completely missing its spirit. You created a culture where compassion is punished and efficiency is valued over humanity. That's not the company I built, and it's not the company I'm going to continue running. Security will escort you out. As Derek sputtered protests, Marcus called security on his phone, and within minutes the former manager was being walked out of the building. Once Derek was gone, Marcus turned back to Sarah, who looked completely shell-shocked by the rapid turn of events. Sarah, I've reviewed your file, and I'm appalled by what I found. You've been written up for showing compassion, passed over for promotions you deserved, and paid far less than your value to this company. That ends today. He pulled out a folder his lawyer had couriered over while he was confronting Derek. Effective immediately, you're promoted to Regional Compassionate Care Manager, a new position I'm creating right now. Your salary is being tripled, and you'll have full authority to override any policy that conflicts with treating customers with dignity and respect. Your job is to travel to our stores and teach other employees what you showed me today. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the papers, unable to speak. Marcus continued. Additionally, I'm personally reimbursing you for the medication you paid for, with interest, and I'm removing all disciplinary actions from your record. They were never violations, they were examples of excellence. Sarah finally found her voice, though it came out choked with emotion. Mr. Wellington, I I don't know what to say. This is incredible, but I didn't do anything special. I just did what anyone should do. Marcus shook his head firmly. That's where you're wrong, Sarah. What you did is rare and precious. Most people would have turned me away or treated me with contempt because of how I looked. You saw a human being who needed help, and you helped, even at personal cost. That's not common. That's exceptional. He paused, his own voice growing thick with memory. My mother was treated like trash by people who judged her appearance when I was growing up. She worked herself to exhaustion, and still, people looked through her like she didn't exist. The few people who treated her with kindness, people like you, they saved her life and gave her hope. You did that for me today, even though you thought I was a stranger. That's the kind of person I want leading this company's culture. Sarah wiped her tears, a smile finally breaking through. Your mother raised an incredible son, she said softly. As the reality of her new position sank in, Sarah's expression shifted to determination. Mr. Wellington, if I'm going to do this job, I need you to know that I'll be honest with you, even when it's uncomfortable. Marcus nodded approvingly. That's exactly what I need. Sarah took a breath. Then you need to know that the problem isn't just Derek. The entire management structure incentivizes the wrong things. Managers are promoted based on speed and efficiency metrics, not on customer care or employee well-being. The best people, the ones who actually care, they burn out or get pushed out because the system works against them. If you really want to change things, you need to change the system, not just replace one manager. Marcus leaned back, impressed by her immediate insight. You're absolutely right, and that's exactly why I need someone like you in leadership. Starting Monday, you and I are going to visit every store in this region. I'm going undercover at each one, and you're going to help me identify what needs to change. We're going to rebuild this company's culture from the ground up. Sarah's smile was radiant now, transforming her entire face. When do we start? The news of Derek's firing and Sarah's promotion spread through the pharmacy like wildfire within hours. Employees who had worked alongside Sarah for years approached her with tears and congratulations, many of them sharing their own stories of being punished for showing compassion. One employee, James, told her how he'd been suspended for spending too much time helping a diabetic customer understand insulin dosages. Another, Maria, had received a written warning for allowing a mother with a screaming baby to skip to the front of a long line. As Marcus listened to these stories throughout the afternoon, his anger grew, not at the employees, but at the system he'd unknowingly allowed to flourish. He realized that his distance from frontline operations had created a vacuum where middle managers imposed their own values, often contradicting everything he believed in. That evening, Marcus called an emergency meeting of his entire executive team, instructing them to be at headquarters by 8 the next morning. He didn't explain why, only that it was mandatory and career-defining. The tone of his voice left no room for questions. The following morning, Marcus stood before his executive team with Sarah by his side, her presence causing confused whispers among the suits, who'd never seen a pharmacy clerk at this level of meeting. I want to tell you about my day yesterday, Marcus began, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. He recounted every detail of his undercover experience, watching his executives' faces shift from confusion to discomfort to outright alarm. When he described Sarah paying for his medication out of her own pocket, he saw some heads nod approvingly, but when he revealed she'd been written up for it, the room fell silent. This is what our company has become, Marcus said, his voice rising. We've created a system where compassion is a punishable offense, and efficiency is the only God we worship. We measure everything except what matters most, whether we're treating human beings with dignity. He slammed Sarah's personnel file on the conference table. This woman has been passed over for promotions repeatedly because she cares too much. Let that sink in. We penalized excellence because it didn't fit our narrow metrics. Marcus's chief operating officer, Richard Chen, cleared his throat nervously. With all due respect, Marcus, we've built a highly profitable company using these systems. Our shareholders expect efficiency and strong margins. If every employee started giving away merchandise or spending excessive time with customers, our costs would skyrocket. The room held its collective breath, waiting for Marcus's response. He turned slowly to Richard, his expression unreadable. "Richard, you're fired. Clean out your office today." Gasps echoed around the table. Richard's face went white. "You can't be serious. I've increased operational efficiency by 32%. Our profit margins are at an all-time high." Marcus leaned forward, his hands on the table. "And our soul is at an all-time low. You've optimized the humanity right out of this company. Yes, profits are up, but at what cost? We've become the kind of corporation I started this company to oppose. If I have to choose between your profit margins and our values, the choice is easy." Richard gathered his things and left without another word, the door closing behind him with finality. Marcus turned back to the remaining executives, many of whom now looked terrified. "Let me be clear, I'm not against efficiency or profitability, but when those things come at the expense of basic human decency, we've lost our way. Sarah is now your peer. She's the regional compassionate care manager, and she has full authority to override any policy that contradicts treating people with dignity." He gestured to Sarah, who stood tall, despite her obvious nervousness. "Each of you will work with her over the coming months to redesign our systems from the ground up. We're going to create new metrics that actually matter. Customer dignity scores, employee empowerment ratings, compassionate care indicators. And if you can't adapt to this new direction, there's the door. I'll gladly show you out like I did Richard." The room remained silent, but Marcus noticed some executives nodding slowly, their expressions shifting from fear to something that looked like relief. Perhaps he wasn't the only one who'd felt something was wrong. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Sarah embarked on their undercover tour of pharmacy locations across 3 states. Marcus would disguise himself differently each time, sometimes as a homeless person, other times as an elderly customer with complex needs, once as a non-English speaker struggling to communicate. At each location, they discovered a mixed landscape. Some employees like Sarah, who fought to maintain compassion despite systemic pressure, others who'd given up and became cold and mechanical, and a few who seemed to genuinely enjoy the power of turning people away. The pattern was clear. Stores with compassionate managers fostered compassionate staff, while stores with efficiency-obsessed managers created hostile environments. Marcus documented everything meticulously, building a case not just for individual changes, but for systemic transformation. At one location in Detroit, an employee named Marcus, coincidentally, spent 40 minutes helping him understand medication interactions, staying past his shift to ensure he had all the information he needed. At another in Cleveland, he was literally told to leave because he smelled bad in his homeless disguise. The most heartbreaking moment came at a store in rural Pennsylvania. Marcus, disguised as an elderly man with trembling hands, dropped his pill bottle, and tablets scattered across the floor. He slowly bent down to pick them up, struggling with the task. Instead of helping, the clerk, a young man named Brandon, sighed loudly and said, "Can you hurry up? There are other customers waiting." Marcus looked up at him, staying in character, and said softly, "I'm sorry, son. My arthritis makes everything slow." Brandon rolled his eyes. "That's not my problem. Maybe you should have someone else pick up your prescriptions if you can't handle it." Marcus felt tears, real ones, sting his eyes. This was how people had treated his mother when she grew older and sicker. This was the cruelty he'd sworn to eliminate from the world. Sarah, who was posing as another customer, intervened. "Here, let me help you, sir," she said warmly, kneeling to gather the pills. She shot Brandon a look that could have melted steel. Later, in the parking lot, Marcus broke down crying, the accumulated weight of witnessing both the best and worst of humanity overwhelming him. But there were victories too, beautiful, redemptive moments that restored Marcus's faith. At a store in Columbus, Ohio, he witnessed an employee named Patricia spend her own break time researching prescription assistance programs for a customer who couldn't afford her heart medication. Patricia called 3 different organizations, finally finding one that would cover 90% of the cost. The customer, a woman in her 60s, cried with relief and hugged Patricia like she was family. Marcus approached Patricia afterward, revealing his identity and promoting her on the spot. "You are exactly what this company should be," he told her, tears in his own eyes. Stories like Patricia's began to spread through the company as word got out about Marcus's undercover operation. Employees started sharing their own acts of compassion on internal forums, creating a grassroots movement of human kindness. The culture was beginning to shift, not from the top down through policy mandates, but from the bottom up through inspired example. Sarah's role became crucial in nurturing this movement, celebrating these employees and protecting them from managers who still clung to the old ways. 6 months after that fateful day when Sarah paid for a homeless stranger's medication, Marcus held a company-wide town hall meeting broadcast to all locations. Thousands of employees watched via video as Marcus stood on stage with Sarah and a dozen other employees they'd discovered during their undercover tour. "I want to tell you a story about the day I almost lost my company's soul," Marcus began, and he shared the complete narrative. His disguise, Sarah's kindness, his anger at the systems that punished her, and everything they'd learned since. The audience was rapt, hanging on every word. "We've made significant changes," Marcus continued. "We've fired 37 managers who couldn't adapt to prioritizing human dignity. We've promoted 63 employees who exemplified our true values. We've redesigned our evaluation systems to measure what matters. How do you treat people? Do you see them as transactions or as human beings? Are you efficient or are you effective at making people's lives better?" He paused, letting the words sink in. "Profits matter. I'm not naive about business, but profits without purpose are meaningless. Our new mission is simple: care for people, all people, regardless of their ability to pay or how they look." Marcus then announced a revolutionary new policy that sent shockwaves through the industry: the Compassionate Care Fund. Every pharmacy location would have a discretionary fund that employees could access without manager approval to help customers who couldn't afford their medications. The fund would be substantial, enough to make a real difference, and employees would be celebrated, not punished, for using it wisely. Sarah Chen showed me that true leadership isn't about following rules blindly. It's about knowing when human need transcends policy, Marcus explained. "I'm institutionalizing that wisdom across this entire company." The announcement made national news within hours. Some business analysts criticized it as unsustainable and financially reckless, but customer response was overwhelming. Within a week, the company's customer satisfaction scores jumped by 43%. More importantly, employees began sharing stories of how the policy changed lives. A diabetic veteran who could finally afford insulin, a single mother who got antibiotics for her sick child, an elderly man who received heart medication that saved his life. Each story reinforced that they'd made the right choice. 1 year after Marcus's undercover test, he stood in the same pharmacy where it all began, this time as himself. Sarah was there too, now overseeing compassionate care initiatives across 12 states and training a team of regional managers in her philosophy. The store looked the same physically, but the atmosphere was transformed. You could feel the difference in how employees interacted with customers, the patience, and genuine care in every transaction. Marcus watched a new clerk named Jennifer help an elderly customer for 20 minutes. Never rushing, never showing frustration, just pure human kindness. He smiled, recognizing Sarah's influence. As he prepared to leave, Marcus placed his hand on the counter where Sarah had added her own money to his a year ago, the moment that changed everything. He thought about his mother, wishing she could see what her struggles had ultimately created, a company that honored every human being regardless of their circumstances. We're not just filling prescriptions anymore, Marcus said to Sarah as they walked out together. We're restoring dignity, one person at a time. Sarah smiled, linking her arm through his like an old friend. That's what I've been doing all along. I'm just glad you finally noticed. And in that moment, Marcus understood that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in lives touched, dignity restored, and compassion multiplied. The billionaire had tested his clerk, but she'd taught him the most valuable lesson of all. Kindness is the ultimate currency.